Holly. So I like to open these conversations by reading back something that you've posted online. Now, this is coming from your Instagram. Here's what it says. Please don't underestimate the energy, emotion, and attention that healing requires. May you be gentle toward your own process of healing. I read that and I feel like I'm in a state of healing. I'm sure all of us are, right? We're healing is a process. So we're constantly in that process. Talk to me about how people often miss understanding how much energy this space actually does require of us.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that you raised that quote. I feel like even hearing you read it right now is like, that's right. I need that reminder too, you know? Yeah, I think for all of the ways that we tend to be so oriented to productivity and efficiency and getting things done and as quickly as possible so that we can get as much done as possible. Um, I think we lose sight at times of the slow work that healing requires, and it's quiet work, and it's not work that's celebrated, and it does require energy and effort that, you know, that's okay. So if we're tired through seasons that we may be healing from various things that we've experienced individually or collectively, I think it's important for us to take note of that and give ourselves grace of being like, well, it's okay if I'm not getting as much done right now because my energy is focused on these other things. And the emotion, carrying all those emotions, like that does require energy and effort. So extending grace to ourselves, I think, is really important through those seasons of healing. Knowing that healing does not have to look a certain way for any of us, right? And it can vary based on the experiences that we're recovering from or healing from, the people who are involved, the layers that it touches on, going all the way back to our childhood. I just think there's a should does not have a place in this process of healing and the time that it takes and the timeline and yeah.
I guess here's a question for you. How do we know or make space to acknowledge that we even need to be healed? Like, how do we know when we are healed from something or when this is a space I think in my life that's going to require more time?
Yeah, I think it depends. It's different for each of us. So I will start with a hefty dose of humility in recognizing that I cannot tell either you or any of our listeners, what that is going to look like for each individual based on or not knowing, the details of the experience. But I think this is where, and I know right before we hit record, I had nodded to your recent reflection that you did about being sheep and the shepherd and learning to listen to that voice and learning to tune into what that voice is nudging us to do throughout our journey. And I think that includes our healing process. And so I think those opportunities to lean into, I mean, I talk and write quite a bit about like contemplative practices that offer that space to really tune into the discernment of what is going on within my body, what is going on within my heart, within my soul, within my mind, with my relationships, and how how do I navigate not only what I'm currently having to walk through, but the things that I have navigated in the past. And perhaps there are things I've navigated in the past that I've repressed or set aside, that I really do need to carefully create space for and advocate for the space and energy that healing requires. Um, Again, knowing that it could look different for each of us based on whatever it is that we have carried and navigated throughout our own unique journeys of the human condition. But we've each had to navigate something. So creating that space, I think, is important. And I think discernment and contemplative practices that allow us to tune in to what is going on within our own inner landscape as it relates to our mental health journey, our faith journey, our physical experiences, all of that belongs.
I want to ask you a question because before we hit record, and I'm just assuming that there is somebody else that is going to hear this question and say, okay, I've been there and now I know what to do after listening to Holly's response. So I told you before we hit record, I had just had what we'll call a crucial conversation where listener, I don't know if this has ever been you, but I heard my voice elevate. I was not telling it to. I thought I was in control. And then I heard this louder voice come out of me that I said, oh no, like you're losing control of your own body in this conversation. I'm at work. Okay, Holly, what does somebody do? They just get in a conversation with somebody at work. They hear their voice elevate. They recognize that their heart is going faster. They get to go back to their office. What do you tell them? What would be a contemplative practice that they could do right then at work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing your experience. And I really want to elevate that this is a practice. So in social work, when I talk with my students about self-awareness or, this work around tuning in, it is a practice. So our listeners, like to you and to our listeners, I could give one, and I'll give some different things to be thinking about or integrating or embodying, and it's a practice. So it's not going to be the first time you walk out of that crucial conversation that you're like, I'm going to do that one thing and it's all going to be fixed. It's not. We have to regularly and consistently show up to these contemplative practices that begin to allow us to be self aware, to even notice. So, for you, Heather, to even have noticed in that crucial conversation that your voice was elevated, that there are folks who they don't recognize that when that happens because, right? Because you're at least paying attention to that. So I think finding ways to, and I write about this quite a bit in the book, in The Soul of the Helper, these ways in which we can create space for stillness and silence and solitude for us to, if you walk out of that conversation, to create space to practice deep breathing. I mean, even just starting there, where you would breathe in to a count of 4, and then exhale to a count of 6. I know some people will talk about holding your breath at the top of it, and I personally would discourage that, especially for those who struggle with anxiety, because holding your breath is it's not helpful. You need to kind of let it go. So breathing into a count of 4, breathing out to a count of 6, doing that a few times just to return to the present moment. Just to return to your body, to reconnect with the breathing that you're engaged in, and to create space for you to reflect on what just happened. Why did I elevate my voice? To get curious, to create space to be curious. I mean, I have this sign behind me that it's from Ted Lasso, the "Be Curious, Not Judgmental," and I think that is not just for others, but also to ourselves. So deep breathing, practicing curiosity. I write quite a bit in the book about centering prayer and could like riff on that for a long time.